Welcome to episode 3 of Digital Media and Tech in Dubai, our brand new podcast focused on bringing listeners topical segments and informative conversations with local experts exploring the latest news and developments in the digital media and tech scene in the burgeoning international capital that is Dubai. I'm Spencer Stryker, professor of digital media at the American University in Dubai. All episodes are recorded on location at AUD in the heart of Dubai's media city. Special guest for episode 3, Ibn Battuta Goes Digital, is Nick Lewis, social media director for Holler, Leo Burnett MENA. A specialist in non-traditional content, after the acquisition of Holler by Leo Burnett MENA back in 2011, Nick came to Dubai as part of the flagship team tasked with bringing Holler's creative digital strategies to the region. Topics discussed in episode 3 include the experience of taking Holler Creative from London to Dubai and Nick's observation of the city's rapid shift to mobile and the social web. Nick's analogy that digital and social technologies can be like the Ibn Battuta of interconnectedness, and some of Nick's opinions as to who are the key influencers in the region. Nick talks about the strategic campaigns for both Samsung and Red Bull in Dubai, including tapping into niche crowd cultures in the city via unique technical and creative approaches. For Red Bull, Leo Burnett launched the hysterical Flugtag event in Dubai, creating compelling lo-fi content while targeting micro-communities with some clever storytelling. Finally, Nick discusses the exciting digital and creative challenges and opportunities surrounding the run-up to Dubai 2020. Hope you enjoy episode 3 of Digital Media and Tech in Dubai, featuring our special guest, Nick Lewis, social media director for Holler, Leo Burnett MENA. We should start by talking about what Holler is, just to make sure people know, and the origin of Holler.
Yeah. So we're a digital creative agency. I would, loosely just say creative agency, really, but we happen to play in the digital space. And they were started maybe about 12 years ago by James Kirkham and Will Pine. And they were acquired 4 years ago by Leo Burnett. And that's how I ended up at Leo Burnett in MENA, because I came to open the satellite offering for Holla in London, but Middle Eastern outpost, basically.
And so you came in right after the acquisition by...
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Okay. And then how did you wind up coming to Dubai? What was that?
We were having lots of conversations. The team was expanding in London. When I arrived, we were about 35 people. By the time I came to open the Middle Eastern outpost, we were nearer 80.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all very quite exciting, because we were opening an outpost in California, in San Francisco, and in other parts of the world as well. And there was an opportunity to see if we could bring some of our thinking from the UK to here. So when Holler started, it became quite well known for the launch of a television show called Skins in the UK, which was a youth TV show.
Mm-hmm.
And it was around the time when MySpace was getting pretty popular.
Okay.
And they completely launched the show through MySpace. So they created the backstories for the characters.
I think I remember that, actually.
It was really cool. And we've gone on to do lots of really interesting, innovative work. One of the big projects that I was involved in was the Mercedes-Benz U-Drive campaign in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was where we gave the consumer the chance to direct the TV commercial. You chose what happened in the next break and created a story around the characters.
So Holler was doing this really innovative stuff, particularly in the space of kind of online video and interactive video.
Online video and, creative content, basically, that just sat in kind of non-traditional spaces. So we did stuff for the likes of Innocent Drinks, where called Tweet and Eat, where they launched a new food pot. And the more you tweeted, the lower the price came.
Okay.
And so it was, things of that nature that just took the understanding of the technology, but really applied it to cultural
That's clever. That's
ways.
good. In other words, a sophisticated use of using the social media technology. And so you were doing something special, and then basically Leo Burnett acquired the company.
Yeah.
But then they decided to bring that company a presence in Dubai.
Yes.
Okay, and then you came along with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was that experience like, taking the work you were doing at Holler to Dubai?
It was a real challenge. I think something that's particularly interesting here that I noticed quite early on was that the Middle East kind of missed desktop online culture.
Right.
So the idea of very prevalent websites, blogs, forums, that didn't really catch on as much and went straight to mobile. So, with
That's
the
interesting.
advent of smartphones.
They skipped that whole sort of generation.
Yeah, it certainly felt like that. I think, when I probably was first online, that definitely same experience and that idea of blog spots and people blogging much more readily probably didn't really catch fire as much here, maybe post-Arab Spring. But then the social web became really, really powerful.
Right, because would you agree that like Instagram is pretty big here?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, all of these platforms like Snapchat has really high adoption rates. Mobile
Yeah.
penetration is huge across the region. And also, culturally as well, things like YouTube become very important. It's kind of like a gateway to the rest of the world, or things that are maybe restricted or aren't available through traditional media here.
Right.
It's like the Ibn Battuta for kids and teenagers to explore and find things.
Okay, you have to explain to anyone who might be listening who doesn't live in Dubai who Ibn Battuta is.
Yeah, my pronunciation is probably really terrible, but he was a very famous Arab explorer from yonder.
And we have the Ibn Battuta Mall as well.
Yeah, we do indeed. That's quite a garish building, and each corner is dressed and set like a different place he went to. So it's quite an interesting place.
So you see, so the analogy you're making is that like sort of mobile, digital kind of certain platforms are like the Ibn Battuta. Is that the concept?
Almost, yeah. It's kind of like the vehicle for kind of worldly experience.
That's very nice. So, I like that. I like that analogy. That's creative.
And yeah, it's given obviously a huge amount of freedom as well. Not only in terms of what you can access, but also what you can create and how you identify yourself and what you're about. At times can be a fairly traditional society. So if young people are, "You'll be a doctor, my boy," kind of attitude, but they're really creative, then they can also have an outlet for that in a way that maybe they wouldn't have been able to before. And what's come with that as well, because of maybe the traditional media landscape not really as diverse or creative in some senses, it's them really galvanise audiences around really fascinating individuals. So you have high reach of Instagram users, influencers across all of these platforms.
In your experience, who would be some of these key influencers here? And I've asked this question to a couple of the other guests as well.
All really kind of depends on kind of what fields that you're looking at. I think it's quite interesting here now that there's some really cool niches that are starting to develop and form. The art and creative community here is really starting to gain a lot of traction. So people like El Seed, for instance, who's based in Dubai, is creating some beautiful, incredible artwork. And he did something very interesting in Egypt just recently, where he painted a mural across, like, I think it was 55 or between 50 and 80 buildings. When you got the vantage point from the cliffside, you saw the whole picture.
Okay.
And he does some really nice stuff. It's quite interesting, but he's maybe not big in terms of huge followings. He has a strong audience. And then it varies really. It depends. You have very, like in kind of the UK or in the US, celebrity culture, and these people are obviously very prevalent on these platforms, also have big audiences. But yeah, El Seed is someone really cool and worth checking out.
Who else do you like that you follow?
Here, that's a good question. We've done some work and things with people like Sharif Fayed in Egypt, who's based here, who's quite an exciting young content creator. There's a few people. And in terms of fashion, we've done some things. There's a girl Nadia, who runs a platform called the Fierce Diaries, and I believe she's Emirati, and she's got a really awesome presence, really great style, and her creative and visual kind of aesthetic is very strong. And then I've worked all the way up to working with kind of big Lebanese pop stars and stuff. So there's a real mix, but it kind of mirrors similar kind of trends I feel that you'll see in maybe other parts of the world, the types of people that are popular and prevalent. There's a whole bunch of these people that are kind of impacting culture in their own way. And
That's great. And by the way, I'll put the links to these to the Instagram profiles of these people you mentioned in the description for the iTunes.
Yeah, so there's some quite broad sets of quite young people that are doing some quite interesting work online.
So let me ask you about some of the work you've done since you've been at Leo Burnett here in MENA. Like, what are some of the campaigns you've worked on? What kind of creative strategies have you implemented and so on?
So we primarily I worked with Red Bull and Samsung here, Samsung being my main client. And we've done quite a lot of strategic work with them. Influencer space is something that we work with them quite closely on, and how they work with people and audiences in passion points, because they want to be associated with lifestyle and popular culture.
Right.
So big fashion strategies, which we've started to implement over the last sort of 3 months, which have been quite interesting.
For which company again?
For Samsung.
For Samsung.
So they were just this last week were at Fashion Forward, which is a big fashion event here in the city, kind of like a mini New York Fashion Week, I suppose.
Yep.
And we did some very cool things with them on Twitter. So we set up tweet cams at the runways, so you could tweet and get an instant picture based on the hashtag that you use. And that was quite cool. But also they've released a 360 camera recently, so we were doing 360 films from the show.
For Samsung from the fashion show.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then in terms of the influencer partnership piece, the main piece of work we've done, which is quite interesting to look at, because it's following some of the big global trends of how brands are starting to create content. And that's we work with the publisher Harper's Bazaar.
Okay.
And
which is an iconic American.
Yes, one of the most famous, or the oldest certainly, fashion publications in the world. And they've worked with Samsung globally on a number of things. But we created some fashion films with them, with local talent, a photographer who shot it was a video about him, but he conducts a fashion shoot solely using the Note 5 product.
Oh, nice.
And he uses the functionality of the camera like a DSLR, so they're
smart.
They're print-worthy pictures, you know.
I remember the first time I saw that was, I think Spike Lee did a commercial where he did the whole thing with the iPhone 4.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's such a good idea to say this entire thing was produced with the product that we're, advertising.
Yeah, and it was quite a rich piece of content. It was really nice. We shot it out in the desert. It was beautiful. But we went and worked where the audience was primarily interested in this. So Harper's Bazaar, they have good reach, but they have a very credible voice in fashion. And we partnered the brand there to showcase the technology functionalities, but also how technology is changing fashion and creativity in that way. And that's something that I think is very important now, in that kind of helping to foster creativity or communities for brands, but more to the point of actually going where you can be relevant and achieving cultural relevance, because taking a TVC commercial that we would shoot maybe about a fashion photographer that nobody knows and placing that on YouTube doesn't really have the impact and doesn't resonate as strongly.
Right, so you find hooks and ways to tie it into digital social culture, to tie it into technology, make it relevant.
I think the idea of crowd culture is really important as well for brands to have the relevance that they want. I think it was...
How do you define crowd culture then?
So crowd culture would be like pockets and communities of people that are interested in kind of an area or a subculture, and that they come together, and that's where they play and what they talk about on social platforms.
So in other words, it's kind of a community online.
Yeah.
It's a niche which follows something passionately.
Yeah.
Right.
And these people are generating bigger audiences, many more views than brands are, and probably aren't investing as much money either. You know?
Right.
So if you took Coca-Cola, for instance, they probably spend I don't know, $30 million a year on video content, YouTube strategies. And
But you're saying it hits a lot less.
They're not even in the top 500 channels in the world.
And that goes all the way back to the beginning of the rise of online video and viral video, and there's essentially this dichotomy between authentic and sort of inauthentic content online.
Right? And that problem is much more prevalent now because the way the platforms are switching, and paid media is in essence the most important part in some ways. It's changing how people approach to use the platform. So earned media is less prevalent because I can get my message in front of many more people now as the algorithms and the platforms change. But then with that, you then start to see people using the platforms like they would a billboard advertisement on Shakeside Road. So I think it's super important that you build cultural relevance and you work with like-minded or creative people that can kind of add that factor to the brand itself. I think the difficult thing at the moment is that obviously it's become much more about the numbers rather than the resonance of the campaign. So in some instances, though, Nielsen will work with Facebook to tell you kind of work on brand love and brand affinity metrics based on the performance of your campaign. But that's very difficult.
Hard to measure. We had the same conversation similar anyway, with Joe Akawi, who was our last guest, and he runs Paz Marketing. He was talking about the difference between quantity and quality of audience. Right?
Yeah, it's an interesting point at the moment. Links, Dubai Links, the advertising festival recently.
Right.
They were talking a great deal about this idea of emotional impact of marketing and advertising.
Right.
And so they were talking about how they measure people's emotional reactions to a piece of content. And I think actually in large part creative agencies are using this as a way to rebut data and metrics and data-driven campaigns and responsiveness, and maybe even to push the media agency further down the scale of conversation. So obviously everyone has their own agenda on these platforms and scenarios, but I can understand why death by numbers is kind of an interesting angle to take for creativity in itself. But
well, let's talk a bit about some of these campaigns you ran. So we talked about Samsung and Red Bull, but what is unique about, what is the adoption like of Samsung in Dubai? How do you kind of try to position that against the iPhone here? Because, we just had the big Apple store open in the Mall of the Emirates, and another one opened in Abu Dhabi. So what is your kind of creative thinking around that?
Well, for the first time in the region, Samsung's now not number one.
Okay.
Android was much more prevalent. Smartphone users were much more inclined to use a Samsung, I think, for a number of reasons. Availability, price as well would be a big factor in that. But now you're starting to see that shift, especially with the likes of the store opening, much more Arabic content on things like iTunes. They're working very hard to build that ecosystem here. And it has that exoticness, right, and that glamour and for here.
So to Emiratis, you're saying, and to the region, Apple is more exotic?
Yeah, I think so. Certainly more, if not exotic, then
more maybe glamorous
and premium. So a big role for Samsung, and the role that we've been trying to play with them is to help build the luxury brand credentials, and hence why we've gone and worked with people like Harper's Bazaar, Fashion Forward, because the fashion and luxury are so intertwined. Even though fashion is such a big cultural force, and there's many different layers to that.
Makes sense.
It also has a premiumness to it. So that's a bit of a challenge, but also not only from an aspirational point of view and helping to that entry-level market. We've done quite a lot with youth audiences. So we had a big campaign for A series here that I just did the strategy for. We didn't do the creative. How I've been working with Samsung is I work on a regional level. They'll take the thinking, and the local offices will then develop that strategy. So something that we noticed here with young audiences in the campaign, that we won a silver at Effie's, which is an effectiveness marketing awards. And this was really about getting young people to go beyond the norm. So the campaign was called Not the Norm. And we recognised that if you were fairly young and you, maybe 15 years ago, going to London was like a big, big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And if you had posted you went to London on Facebook, if Facebook was here that time, you'd get a lot of traction, a lot of likes. But that's no longer enough anymore for young people as well here. So you would have to go to London and be on the London Eye with Prince Harry and the Chelsea football team, and then you would get some traction. And the camera for the new A series phone enabled a wide angle selfie. So we wanted to get people to think about how they can make the picture bigger to make it more interesting. So the norm would be maybe taking a photo of a tourist on a camel on JBR. Not the norm would be in the desert with 4 or 5 camels with a boat and a clown. So something kind of satirical, right? That's kind of a bit bizarre and quite funny, but also injecting a big piece of humour into that work to kind of resonate with young people that are actually looking to stand out. And a big part of the youth culture here that we noticed is this idea of the shabab, or something that I learnt here. And again, I really apologise for my Arabic pronunciation, but the idea of groups and cliques and the crew kind of.
The
idea.
shabab, it means.
It means like a group of male friends, basically. I presume there was a female version of that as well, but this like I and we kind of idea of like want to be with all the crew. But I want to be slightly different. And you see that how the guys dress here and stuff in the Kandora. Again, apologies. And how maybe they might accessorize that. So it's still quite formal and look like everybody else, but there's a certain twist or panache that they put on that.
Interesting observation. Now, when you're marketing, for example, and that's really interesting how you talk about bringing Samsung here and positioning it against the iPhone. But something like 85% of Dubai is expats, right? So how do you approach that? I mean, because you're talking about positioning for sort of, Emiratis, right?
Yeah, so, well, not necessarily Emirati, but because the Emirati population is very small here, relatively speaking, like you said. Something which I'll touch on with in terms of Red Bull and who we work with, we had an interesting strategic approach for I've forgotten the name of the event now. This is terrible. So they do an event where Flugtag, where you have to run off and you're dressed in kind of this aircraft and you run off a pier and you see how far you can go.
Wow,
so
that sounds a little scary.
Yeah, it's not that high. It's maybe 8 meters.
And what's on the other side?
They ran into Dubai Creek. So they do this all around the world,
cool.
Flugtag, and you create a flying machine, you see how far you can fly.
Oh, interesting. But that's something that's like an international kind
it's an international event that that they brought here. It was the second time that they brought it here. And we looked at how we could then take, using Facebook's audience insights and technology, of how we could do targeted communication. So take one key message, create something for, say, a Filipino audience, for a South Asian audience, for an Arab expat audience, for an Emirati audience, for a Western expat audience.
Wait a second, these are all versions of the Flugtag campaign? Or?
Yeah, so we had like a lead message, and it would be very simple things as well, like not even just sophisticated video, but like posts that are then maybe in multiple languages, targeted at different audiences, different turns of phrase.
So just experimenting with how you could sort of slightly position it for these different communities.
Yeah, and I think this is a way that campaigns here can be really, really effective, is how you take that one big message and use social to disseminate it across multiple interests or nationalities, language as well, primarily. Coca-Cola did something in the States a few years ago around the Thanksgiving commercial, where they had like a Hispanic person, African American, a soldier, a gay person, whatever. And they had one big film which showed all of them, and that was shown on TV. And then when you went online, on Facebook primarily, as a Hispanic person living in LA that was interested in X, Y, and Z, I would then follow that Latino story as opposed to everything. And I think you could do that here very well, given the different types of people that you can communicate with. It wouldn't work for everything because economic factors and audience are split, not just by nationality, right? There's many prevailing issues with how you target people and what with. But that's an exciting area for digital marketing, I believe, here, is how you treat multiple audiences with one single campaign.
Interesting, very interesting.
Which can be quite a challenge.
Now how am I probably pronouncing it wrong? The Flugtag, is that what it's called? And that was for the Red Bull campaign?
Yeah. So the event's called Flugtag,
right.
And we created a series of kind of very lo-fi video content and a lot of still assets for them. And we did it around recruitment of teams. So you actually have to submit an idea for your team, and then you have to go away and build it once you get selected, and then you take part in
the contest, I'm assuming, is you create a flying machine, you jump into the creek, and you see how far you can go.
Yeah,
okay.
It's very funny. It's really great. It's amazing.
I'll put a link to that.
Yeah, you should. There's some YouTube clips, I'm sure, of some amazingly talented, creative people.
Is Red Bull the most popular energy drink in UAE, in Dubai?
Because
there is a competitor.
There's a couple of competitors, yeah.
Horse, right, is one of them.
Yeah, there's a few. There's a couple of kind of lower market products, but I'm not sure on the exact figures. So I'd love to say we were or they are, but I think they're pretty high up there.
Red Bull is typically a lifestyle brand.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the marketing, this creative strategy around it is like go out there, do some awesome kind of extreme sports.
Yeah, or other push yourself into other fields. So like creativity is another part of it.
Okay.
So
it's also associated with music.
Yeah,
too.
very much so. Yeah, they do a lot with music. So they have an interesting challenge here of how can they build talent and an audience, right, around something that maybe people don't necessarily know so much about, but then that gives them an amazing opportunity if they find like the next big music producer and he's from Lebanon, but he's moved to Dubai and they've worked with him here, and then he goes on to international acclaim. For the brand to be a part of that story is a very, very powerful thing.
I see.
And I think that's a really nice sentiment to have as well as a brand. I feel that something that's quite interesting here is that normally brands latch on to creative cultures. So first the artists move into an area, make it cool, hip and trendy, then the young professionals come in, and then before you know it, there's a Starbucks there.
Okay.
Whereas actually here it'd have to be the other way around, I believe. You need a slightly different Starbucks that looks and feels a little bit better, that encourages the creative community to come there, to do something. It gives the brand a really strong opportunity to be a part of someone's story and be a part of the city's story as well. It's so new. There's a lot still to be done and achieved. You have 2020 coming. And it's quite phenomenal what has been done here, but say for a brand to build a community here and make something really special happen in 15 years' time, people will look back and be like, wow, Starbucks did this awesome thing, or Red Bull did that.
So you mentioned 2020. So what's Leo Burnett Mina thinking in that regard? What is do they have a creative strategy approach around 2020?
I would say not just yet. It's a little bit of a way off.
Perhaps how does that affect sort of the creative, maybe the digital social scene in Dubai more generally?
I think we've just seen recently with the launch of their new logo last week or the week before, and there's a lot of excitement. And I think maybe in other cities where there's been Expo, so Milan recently, maybe in this build-up and this anticipation for the event, there's a lot of cynicism. Here, I don't feel that people are cynical around these types of events.
I don't think so
and
either.
They're very proud and they're very excited by it. So not only way before 2020, there's lots of opportunity to engage people and amplify like strong positive sentiment. And even with something as relatively unimportant in my eyes, the logo itself. We've announced a new logo that trends on Twitter, and there's a big conversation around it. So there's definitely opportunity in the run up to it to help shape and build conversation around Expo, definitely. And each week it seems now, with the Opera House being sort of starting to take much more shape of what they're going to do there. There's a bigger cultural conversation that's happening here that I feel probably wasn't happening, maybe a couple of years ago. So Expo is really sort of laying the foundations for that. And as we get to 2020, it's only going to increase, and more of the like will happen, I'm sure.
So a big opportunity for digital and social in Dubai, and also an opportunity for a lot of interesting creative stuff to happen.
Yeah, definitely. And also the opportunity to find new talent and emerging talent. People will be looking towards 2020 as of how they can make their mark in the city, whether that's by being prepared and ready for it, or actually trying to be a part of the Expo in itself. So you'll see a lot of people are starting to have conversations and work on projects for sure.